I didn't realize how strong I could be until I was faced with the circumstances. And I think that may be true for a lot of people. We have a lot more strength in us than we know. And I don't know that we need to know right now. We just need to trust that when things come up, we got it.
Hello, and welcome to the Innovative Mindset Podcast. I'm your host, Izolda Trachtenberg. In the show, I interview innovative peak performers. I talk with entrepreneurs, business owners, and creatives who are pushing the envelope to work creatively and authentically. We explore how to cultivate innovative genius to achieve our visions to succeed. This week's show is brought to you by my book, Speak From Within. If you need to communicate better and leave your listeners riveted, you'll want to check the book out. And now, let's get to it. Hello, and welcome to the Innovative Mindset Podcast. I'm your host, Izolda Trachtenberg, and I am super thrilled you're here. I'm also thrilled to introduce you to my guest today. Christina Helena is a speaker, writer, and performer, and life coach, and she's based in New York City. She's one of the youngest pancreatic cancer survivors, and she has a 13-inch scar across her abdomen. She's redefining and modernizing the stigma behind trauma and pain with one simple thought. My scar is sexy. Christina's story is currently in development as an off-Broadway autobiographical solo show entitled Scar. Most recently, Gold Coast featured Christina's talk about self-love and self-responsibility, and her TEDx talk is about the perceived fear of mortality humans have as a substitution for self-responsibility for resolution of pain. That's so fascinating. I can't wait to talk about this. Her bi-weekly blog about My Scar is Sexy is about the human experience. Christina is a lover of scuba diving, which is exciting to me because I love scuba diving too, and whitewater rafting, and she does it all over the world. You're going to be able to learn a lot more about her today, but if you want to check out her website and sort of read along as we chat, you can go to www.christinahelena.com. So, Christina, I'm thrilled to welcome you to the show. Thank you so much for joining me.
Izolda, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's such a pleasure. Such a pleasure. I it's funny because you know that I wrote out all of these questions to ask you because as soon as I started looking at your incredible life and the fact that you're even here, I have pages and pages and pages of things that I want to talk about. It's amazing. And the first thing I really want to talk about, if it's okay with you, is your TED Talk. I watched it and you fascinate me. I mean, first, many years ago, the doctors told you had 6 months to live, and yet here you are. So what happened and how are you here?
I'm pretty stubborn. I
love it.
I have I'm pretty stubborn. You know, when I heard I had 6 months to live, like every cell in my body was like, yeah, that's not happening. No, like I just rejected that reality immediately. And my willpower just thought, well, I don't like your statistic and I'm going to find a solution to this. And I love problem solving. I just love challenges and having to overcome them. So that just began this ferocious, I would say, side of myself that just started calling doctors and started investigating this type of cancer that I had, these particular types of tumors that I had. And I just kept asking questions and questions and questions and questions. And every time I didn't like an answer, I asked more questions to that answer because I just wanted to know. And I just collected so much information by asking so many questions to the medical industry and doctors that I was able to find a path to healing and a path to a resolution and a particular surgery that would be able to save me. And ultimately, that's what happened. I met a series of surgeons and I chose the surgeon I felt the safest with, the most confident with. And we had to perform what is called a Whipple surgery, where they remove up to 5 organs, either partially or fully, and then reroute your digestive system. And that's what we did. Now, the reason I say up to 5 is because every person that has pancreatic cancer has sort of like a different combination of it. It just depends what organs near the pancreas have been infected. For some people, it may be like 1 or 2 organs. For other people, it may be up to 5 organs or more. So that's what dictates how many organs are removed. And whether they're removed completely or partially also is dictated by whether or not the tumors have infected the area. So for me, it was 5 organs that were infected and were removed to save my life. And then my digestive system was reconstructed. And here I am.
Wow. You say it like, so this is, and then we went for a drive on Sunday. It's amazing to me. It's amazing. You amaze me. I'm going to just say it that way, but it's also amazing to me that the tenacity that you had when you were pretty young to go, okay, this is how things are going to go. And you chose your path. And it sounds like you chose it
Yeah.
with just a ton of grit, which I think is amazing. But I would love to know, because this, I'm going to give you an example from my own life. I follow my gut. I follow my intuition. And I know saying I follow my gut to someone who's had many of those organs removed is silly, but that is what I do. I follow my intuition, and I let my intuition, my instincts guide me. When you were going through the process of all of this, what guided you? What were you listening to make those decisions?
So, 2 things. I will preface with I follow my gut too, as much as I have left of it. So don't worry about that. You know, I don't know that I have a direct answer to this, except for I've always followed my gut.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how not to follow to my instinct and my impulse. It's something that I can resonate to the experience, having started really young, really young, when I was a little girl. And it just became something that when I was young, I would listen to it, I would have impulses, and then I started to see that it was right, that my impulses were true, or gut feelings that I had would become truth at some point. So I had a lot of evidence when I was young that my gut instinct, there was something to it. So I just became very comfortable with listening to it. And because I'm comfortable with listening to it, I feel that in moments where it's screaming at you, not just talking to you, those moments become sharp. And when you hear the gut or the impulse or the instinct scream at you, I know to listen. And that's what happened to me with this experience. It wasn't just talking to me, it was screaming at me. And I listened.
And that's that.
I mean, I know it
true.
may sound odd or uncomfortable, but I think you can have a relationship with your instinct where you doubt it, or you can have a relationship with your instinct where you don't doubt it, and it's the one thing you don't doubt.
Absolutely.
And that is tricky, right? There's a gray, there's a delicate balance to that. And only one's inner radar can tell one what to trust and what not to trust, right? And I think the more we practice this, the more comfortable we get with it, and also the clearer, if that's even a word.
Clearer, sure.
Clearer. Mm-hmm. Forgive me. English is not my first language, so sometimes I have these like lost in translation moments. But
right.
The more clear that becomes for us, that we can identify that within our own self. It's a relationship with your own self and your own instinct. And the more you listen, the sharper it becomes.
I agree on all counts. English isn't my first language either, and we should talk about that. The fact that we're both immigrants and we both got placed in Detroit, I think that's just hilarious. And yet we never met. I think I'm a little bit older than you are. But yeah, it's interesting what you just said about the more you listen to it, the sharper it becomes. The way I look at it, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this, the idea of conscious versus subconscious. My conscious mind can lie to me, but my subconscious mind never lies to me. It doesn't lie. It has no reason to lie. And so the more I listen to those subconscious sort of little whispers, the more I walk the path I'm supposed to walk. How do you feel about how does that align with what you believe?
I think I would agree with you completely, to be honest with you, because I'm not an expert on the subconscious, and necessarily, I feel it's like one of those words that sometimes it means one thing, but it resonates as something different for so many people.
Sure.
And I resonate with what you said in regards to the whispers, right? These impulses, like for me, they come in impulses. They come in these random thoughts. They come in these instincts or gut intuitions, I would say. And sometimes the subconscious for me comes through my dreams. I can have really powerful, wild dreams. And I've gotten into the habit of, when that happens, wake up, write the dream out, keep a dream journal. And that has become very insightful for me, because I feel that with dreams, the dream is just one piece of the puzzle. And a long time ago in my master's program, I took a class on dreams and psychotherapy.
Mm-hmm.
And one of our exercises was that we had to keep a dream journal for 10 weeks, the entire course, time of the course. And what I found fascinating was that if I read every single dream individually at the time that it happened, it wouldn't really make a whole lot of sense. When I read the entire journal at the end of the course as one long entry, it was wild. It was really wild, because it was multiple pieces to the puzzle put together, and it started to take shape. And things made more sense to me. And I feel like for me, that was my subconscious communicating with me, but in doses, right?
Sure.
I think if we all heard what is in our subconscious in one dose, in one session, it could be crippling. It could be so severely painful that it's counterproductive. Part of healing, I think, takes time. And thank God it takes time, because it's too much to take on all together in one moment. We're humans. We're delicate. And we have to be very gentle with that reality of ourselves. I think we're not superheroes, even though we have moments of being superheroes within our experience of the human experience.
You know, I agree with you completely. And yet you have been superhero-like many times in your life. So even as I hear you say we're human and we're not superheroes, I mean, I agree. I think it could be overwhelming. I think it could overwhelm us if we had to deal with all of and process all of the things that the subconscious, or the some people call it the shadow self, whatever the word is that we decide to use, that it might have to display to us. And yet there are times when just the amount of strength that we can show is incredible. It's almost unbelievable. And in your own past, the car accident where your car flipped when you were in LA.
Yeah.
You said something that's so fascinating. When the officer asked your name, you said something along the lines of, "Nothing can kill me, officer, because I can't die with an unresolved soul."
I know. I did say that to the police officer in LA. I think he looked at me and was like, this girl is just completely out of it, or just nuts. For me, that moment in Los Angeles, getting, I had been in 4 car accidents prior to that car accident. And all 4 car accidents prior to that, I had just been rear-ended at a red light. I was completely stopped, and somebody would always rear-end me. And I found that to be so fascinating. It was like the cars behind me were just pushing me forward, as if I metaphorically did not want to move forward in my life. So I kept getting in these car accidents where I was getting rear-ended. And then this 5th car accident, I was flipped upside down. I don't even know how many times I flipped. I blacked out during part of it, I suspect. And that was like the final straw for me. I thought, okay, this is an accident you probably could have very easily died from. Had you looked at the car, you would have thought, there's no way anyone walked out of this car alive. And I thought, you didn't die. You're not going to die until you resolve your soul. I've been pretty fascinated with the soul. I don't know where it came from. My fascination, I mean, but I've always just paid a lot of attention to it. Mm-hmm. And I had trauma that was unresolved. I had wounds, scars that were unresolved that I find to be pretty normal for a lot of human beings. And I had more of a fear of dying unresolved than dying, because I don't know why. Who knows? I grew up in Greece, and I wouldn't say super dogmatic environment, Greece, but Greece can be dogmatic in a way. It's, the majority of the country is Greek Orthodox, and that is definitely the soul of the country. And I had this relationship to perhaps the afterlife, whatever that is, whether there is an afterlife or not, whether there's reincarnation or not. I have no idea about any of these things. I don't even necessarily subscribe to any of them, because the reality is I don't know. Mm-hmm. But I used to think, well, if there is an afterlife, well, then I should do my best to go there as prepared and as resolved as possible, right? So I see how glimpses of my upbringing and religion have affected me, even though I don't necessarily want to subscribe to them, which is probably why I went to study theology and philosophy, because I had a lot of questions about the subject matter. But the idea of dying with things of this world, taking them with me, I just didn't like that feeling. I wanted that experience of coming to the end, or, some of us don't have the privilege of, and I say privilege, right, of knowing we're in transition. Some people die from bullets, and some people die from car accidents in the snap of a moment. And some people have a slower death where a disease is deteriorating their body. And I think because I experienced the possibility of that, I thought a lot about what it would like to die. Am I resolved? Have I done what I wanted to do? Have I said what I wanted to say? Oh, that thing that I thought I was over is not over, because now here I'm being faced with my mortality and it's still there. Oh, I don't like that. The reality that something I thought I had overcome still had power over me. And I didn't like the experience of something having power over me at the end of my life. I guess I wanted, for my own self, I wanted that transition to be peaceful. So when I was faced with my mortality at 19 years old from a disease, from cancer, I thought I became a witness to these realities in myself that I perhaps didn't want to acknowledge, or didn't even have the capacity to acknowledge. I mean, I was 19, for Christ's sake. I was young, and my brain hadn't been developed yet. So I learned a lot from that experience, which then dictated how I was going to live moving forward. I wanted peace. I wanted peace. And I wanted to feel that feeling of scars and wounds don't have power over me. I have taken my power back from them. And that I can live not being afraid of when death might come again. Because in a sense, I'm ready. Not because I've lived everything I wanted to live, but I don't feel entrapped by shame or wounds.
I
lose you.
No,
Are you still there?
I am. I'm just, you said so much that I was absorbing it for a second. There was so much wealth and richness and juice to what you just said that I was taking a second to just sort of go, okay. So Something that you said several times struck a chord in me. You said you didn't want to die with things unresolved, and that question came up then. What does resolved look like?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I still think about that. I don't know that I can. I think the human spirit, mind, body, soul is just an absolute genius. And I mean that in so many ways. Not only is every individual like this genius in the capacity of how they can think and create and be, right? You were talking earlier about this ability to be a super, like a superwoman or a superman. And I didn't realize how strong I could be until I was faced with the circumstances. And I think that may be true for a lot of people. We have a lot more strength in us than we know. And I don't know that we need to know right now. We just need to trust that when things come up, we got it. We got it. I trust now that whatever comes on my path, however deeply painful it is or challenging, I got it. I can move through it because we are creatures that can persevere. And to be resolved, I think, is an inner relationship with oneself. You know, I can't tell anyone whether or not they're resolved or not. I can just know how I feel inside. I often talk about this as the inner rhythm, the inner voice. For me, when it's quiet, then that is the experience of resolved. I don't have self-hate popping up and trying to tell me not to do something or trying to psych me out from writing a project or saying you're not good enough at doing this or you really shouldn't do that. I don't have any of that inner talk, and I give myself permission to be myself, you know, within the boundaries of not hurting other people, of course. And I feel like that for me is my thermometer for feeling resolved.
Is that inner voice is not chattering at you? That's what that means?
Yeah, that it's not chattering at me. It's not being condescending or mean. You know, that negative talk that we can
Oh,
have
yes.
sometimes, you know?
Sure,
It's
sure.
also how I feel, Izolda. You know, like I feel good. I feel at peace. I feel comfortable with myself. I feel very okay to be who I am without judgment, and that who I am is Christina, and that is okay. And I'm not the same as anyone else because no one is the same as anyone else. I think, you know, like that's where the idea for my scar is sexy came from. That's where it was birthed from. And the birth of my scar is sexy. It's not just about the physical scars. As a matter of fact, I'm more intrigued by the scars that are not physical. Yes, I have a 13-inch scar across my abdomen, and that can cause a lot of things because of my relationship with the scar. If my relationship with my physical scar is not positive or healthy, I could be ashamed of it. I could want to cover it up. I could feel that people judge it or not find me pretty, you know, on a basic level of, you know, in a dating environment, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm fascinated by scars that are emotional and spiritual and psychological. And those also have a lot of weight. And for me, my scar is sexy. Scar is in all those categories. And whatever the scar is, whatever the wound is, I don't think that whatever happened is sexy. And I will clarify that, and I will always clarify that, because sometimes we get scars from vile actions that someone else took, violent actions that someone else took, scary and dangerous situations. But I do think that who we become because we decide to heal the scar take responsibility for our own relationship to the scar, even though the responsibility for causing the scar is not ours, is very important. And I think that is sexy. I think a human being that says, you know what, this, and this happened. I wasn't responsible for it, but I'm going to heal it because I know that whatever happened, whoever happened it, is not going to come and apologize. Cancer is not going to come and apologize to me and say, hey, Christina, I'm so sorry. I kind of came into your life at 19 and just turned your whole life upside down and got you, kicked out of college, and you didn't get to finish right away. You had to go back, and I had to remove 5 of your organs, and I caused a lot of other, domino effect health issues for you. Cancer is not coming to apologize to me. And I can be as mad or as frustrated with the fact that this disease came and turned my world upside down. Or I can say, you know what? Things happen. And sometimes they're not pretty and sometimes they're not good. But I'm going to take it and empower myself with it and with that experience and focus on the positive, because it has given me so much positive. And I think the act of a human being looking at their scars with that kind of perspective, that's sexy. To me, that's very sexy. Who you are in your soul is sexy, not what you look like, I often say, what we look like goes away. And, we
Time
age,
marches on.
And exactly, we age, and that is part of it. And I think especially, I don't want to say especially as a woman, because I think this is something that men are challenged with as well. But I tend to speak to women mostly about it, and I hear women's perspective of the pressure of staying young and looking young. And I think that's especially why I use the word sexy. I think the word sexy is so often used in what we look like physically. And I'm not all about that. And what I mean by that is I want sexy to mean a lot of things, or at least it means that to me.
And it makes all the sense in the world. The mind, the brain is the sexiest organ. It is. It really is. It's what gives us everything as far as how we view the world and how we make an impact in the world. But it takes a certain amount of courage. And, there was another thing that you said in the TED Talk, and I want you to, if you don't mind, talk about this because it fascinated me. You said that we as humans, we fear the responsibility that living truly requires us to actually live. And I find that so fascinating because it at its base, it seems like you were asking the people who were listening to you, and I watching the TED Talk felt that very much, that you were throwing down the gauntlet of saying, live truly, be who you really are. What do you mean by that when you invite people, when you challenge people to live as they truly are? What does that mean?
I recognized in myself after I had my Whipple surgery and post, in recovery of cancer, I will say, that experience unveiled to me the masks I was wearing to operate in the world within safe boundaries and circumstances. And what I mean by safe, it wasn't like I was in unsafe, dangerous environments. I mean, within the safety and the comfort of what we want to show the world and how we want the world to perceive us, right? I feel as a human being, this is what I was doing. And from, some of my coaching clients, other people have been challenged with this as well. We all wear a mask. and we want the world to see us in a particular way. And that is okay, actually. There's nothing wrong with that. Because at the end of the day, everyone should feel safe and comfortable and good. But where I, as you say, drop the gauntlet and want to challenge people is, do you need the mask? Or is there something that the mask is replacing that if you healed, it would allow you to wear less masks? And that process of taking off the masks and healing what the mask is there to cover up is fascinating to me, because that's what I had to see in myself. And I don't know if anyone was wearing more masks than me. I think I had the most masks a human being could wear in the history of humanity. And I began to look at my masks, because what facing my mortality did for me was, hey, you've been wearing all these masks this whole time. Yeah, you think you've dealt with all this stuff, but you haven't. You think you've lived this life that you wanted to, but you haven't. And what are you going to do about it? Because, oh, the time is ticking and I might take your life away in about 2.5 weeks. Because there was a high mortality chance with the operation I was having on top of the 6 months that I had been given to live. And for me, it just kind of put me into that questioning space immediately. Mm-hmm. So what I mean about, we fear living, I think we wear the masks because we're comfortable wearing the masks. And I want to challenge people to be okay with being uncomfortable. Because it's in being uncomfortable that you're going to learn more about yourself. And I call that the magic about who you are, like really who you are. And it's fascinating. And then when you start to fall in love with that process of discovering more and more of who you are, your authentic self, not that any version of yourself at any time of the journey is inauthentic. And I will say that, because it's not like there's this authentic self and anything but that is inauthentic. It's all authentic, but getting more and more to the core of who you are, closer and closer and closer with less and less masks. And all that requires, from my experience, compassion and love and patience and time and gentleness. Negative talk is the opposite of gentleness. And that's hard for a lot of people, including me. It took a long time to quiet that gentleness. And for me, it was having patience with it, having a lot of patience with it.
Sure. And it makes sense, patience, kindness, compassion. It's amazing to me how often we will show those to others, but we'll shortchange our own selves, that we won't show that same kind of compassion and kindness and patience to ourselves, to the process that we are going through. I find that fascinating. Yeah. How often I speak to my own coaching clients and I'll ask them that question. If you can show that compassion to this person in your life, what keeps you from showing it to yourself? And they often have sort of, the light bulb goes off over their heads, because it's not something we think about. And yet you seem like you had to think about it from a very, relatively speaking, young age, at 19, 20 years old, when you were dealing with all of this. But then, like you said, the traumas happened earlier. So you started on some level, it sounds like, dealing with some of this, surviving it even earlier than the cancer diagnosis. And you said something I'm quoting your entire TED Talk back at you. I'm sorry, but I have to, because it's so fascinating. You said, I had done an impeccable job of becoming someone else, becoming the imprint of all the trauma I was avoiding. And to me, and I got it as soon as I heard you say it, it's the false self. And that false self is a narrative I'm sure many people live in. So when you were faced with that and you decided that you wanted to truly be you, what did you do? How did you start? And how do you recommend someone else start if that's what they want to do, if they want to start really chipping away and removing those masks? The writer Pema Chodron says, start where you are. So where is the beginning point? And I know you might say it's different for everybody, but if you could recommend a beginning point so that if someone really wanted to start looking at that part of themselves, what would you say?
Yeah, you're right. I would say that the journey is different for everybody because it really is. Everybody, resonates to different things differently than the other. And I don't think there's one path for everyone, but I would agree with Pima Chodron. To start with yourself is the best place and perhaps the most vulnerable place, because it's not an immediate answer,
Mm-hmm.
right? I
Mm-hmm.
think going to a to-do list that says, oh, the path to healing is these 10 steps, and crossing off the 10 steps feels comforting. And I wish it was as comforting as that.
Mm-hmm.
But in my experience, it wasn't, because as you grow, you keep transforming. And then that new version of yourself may be open to something that an older version of you wasn't. And then that becomes beneficial, right? So who you become keeps affecting what you use to keep going forward on your path next. I think if we all listen to ourselves more, we would have, it takes us back to the beginning of our conversation, talking about that impulse, the instinct, the gut intuition. There's so many words for it. You have the answers. I truly believe that. I truly believe that the human spirit has the answers. Where I think our life and circumstances get in the way, and as they should get in their way, because that's their job. Life is life. It's not like they're doing something bad. Circumstances in life is doing what they're supposed to be doing, and we're going to do what we're supposed to be doing. They tend to mute that voice, that inner voice.
Mm-hmm.
And if one can just listen, and I think the game changer for me was to listen with compassion and love instead of judgment. And I promise you, for me, it took a decade to get to listening to that. And I say that because I don't want anyone listening to think that is an easy task, or that it was necessarily easy for me. It took me a decade of conscious trying to listen with compassion and love, and not have the negative talk within myself. You will know what you need. And there's just so many things. I mean, from books to leaders who talk about subject matters, depending on what you want to explore within yourself, to therapy and meditation and dance and this writing. I mean, for me, writing was crucial part of the experience. And that's where my solo show was birthed. My solo show was birthed out of me consistently writing about my experience as I was healing from my experience. And then at the end, I ended up with this solo show that we are developing for the theater.
I love that so very much. I love, 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 love that you took control. You took, not control, maybe ownership of your life and turned it into art. That's just the most, for the person who hosts the Creative Mindset podcast, this is brilliance, just sheer brilliance. I love it. I love it, love it, love it. And it's interesting to me that you chose to express your process through creativity. And I'd love it if you take a minute, if you could, and talk about how did you decide that it ought to be a play rather than a book or a long poem or something like that? Like, you wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote, but what prompted that spark of inspiration to tell your story in this way as a show that you could perform for people?
I I I was a writer in a sense. I wrote poetry when I was younger.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that I necessarily consciously thought, what am I going to create this into? I just started writing. And at first, it started as these poems. And then it evolved into songs. And I would say probably really bad songs, because I'm not a singer. I'm not a musician. I don't even know where I had the audacity to write a song, but I did it, right? Like I was like, oh, I'm going to write a song. And then the storytelling within the songs and the poetry then became monologues. And then the monologues, I realized, could be sort of put back to back, and then they would tell a story. And then after I wrote the monologues, when I wrote monologues about other characters in my life, other people in my life, then I wrote the monologues from their point of view. And then when I wrote them from their point of view, then I rewrote the monologues and I included dialogue. And then I destroyed all the monologues. And then I took the dialogue from one monologue and the dialogue from another monologue from the two characters that were in the same circumstances. And then I put it into a scene. And that was really the process that just happened, instead of me deciding it was going to happen that way, of how I ultimately ended up with the solo show. And I would say pretty early on in the process. Now, mind you, I've been writing my solo show for 8 years, because writing autobiographical work is delicate and needs time, especially if you're healing from the story as you write it. It's not necessarily a fast process. But I realized early on, because of the structure and just what naturally came out of me, that it was going to be a solo show. And I, as a performer, was really excited by that as well. And also absolutely terrified, like beyond terrified, at the idea of playing 38 different characters who were all people from my life.
Wow.
And then like having to become them and transform into them, and then have to study them. But what was fascinating, what was not fascinating, I don't know if that's the right word. What became unveiling about that process was, in order to perform somebody else who you know in your real life, you have to understand your story from their perspective to play them authentically. And there became another form of healing. Now, had you asked me earlier, like, what would someone do to heal? I had no idea that writing characters based on real life people in my life would require me to heal myself in order to play them. But that is something I discovered as I was on the process. As I became a newer, more authentic version of myself, that became that truth unveiled itself to that version of me. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. Complete sense. Absolutely.
And that's what I mean by, don't think about too much about what to do to heal. Just kind of go with your instinct and commit to the fact that you want to heal.
Okay. So here we go. One of the other things that you said in your TEDx talk was, our human need to belong suppresses our pain and empowers our fear. How does someone who is afraid just kind of follow their instincts? Like, how do you get to that point where you can, I'm not saying face down the fear. I'm saying perhaps, because I think fear honestly is trying to give us information. So how do you invite fear in for a cup of coffee? How do you go, okay, let me learn from you what I need to learn from you before I let you go? How do we do that? How do we, instead of suppressing our pain through our need to belong, and therefore empowering that fear, how do we step into our own shoes, if you see what I mean? What is your thought on, and I know, again, you'll probably go, that's individual, Izolda, stop asking me these questions. But at the same time, there's something here for me that I know, I hope I don't sound too nitpicky. Like I've got, I'm sort of like a dog with a bone at this point, but there's something here that I feel is an awareness thing, that once we're aware that we want to heal, and we grab onto it, that becomes the most important thing. And then on some level, we don't worry so much about belonging anymore. We don't worry so much about being afraid anymore. But the question I have is, how do we get to that point? How do you encourage the people that you work with to get to that point?
Fear, one's relationship to fear, and I am far from an expert on fear, because I think there are moments where I still experience fear. I think I would have no pulse if I didn't experience fear still. And it's a consistent, what I will say about fear for me is about my relationship to fear.
Mm-hmm.
And I have had a lot of growths with my relationship to fear. And I continue to work on that relationship, because I think it's one of the most important relationships one can have with themselves and a particular part of themselves. Because fear can be so crippling, but fear can also be so energizing. And recognizing both and being able to identify which one the current fear within you is birthing is really, really important. And then furthermore, understanding what the fear is about. Is the fear literal? Like, right, this is like really, really scary. Like, I like to go whitewater rafting, and I like to go scuba diving, right? And recently I was in the Philippines and I went scuba diving with thresher sharks. And I was like, oh my God, this is scary. Like I was sincerely nervous. Everyone was like, no, they're gentle. But I was like, I hear shark, and my autonomous reaction is, they're going to bite me. I'm going to die. So there's that kind of fear. And then there's fear that's like, I have fear because this is challenging me to become better. This is challenging me to do something that I need to do, but I'm terrified of doing, right? And there's different types of fear.
Sure.
And being able to understand what the fear within oneself is about is half the battle, because then you can move through it. Or if you need help moving through it, get the appropriate help to move through it, or the appropriate support, right? And fear is, we could do a whole other episode just on fear.
Absolutely.
And I will say this again, because I'm far from an expert on it. I think in my younger years, I suffered a lot from fear, quite a bit.
And I think you're absolutely right, though, that, we all experience it differently, and there are different types of fear. And yet, I think anytime, they don't call it growing pains for nothing, right? Anytime you are uncomfortable, anytime you push your limits, you strike out for new territory, new ground, a certain level of fear is almost natural, because otherwise you're not taking good care of yourself, So whenever we're trying something new, I think a certain level of fear is okay. It's just, to me, the issue is when it debilitates us, when it stops us from meeting that new horizon or from rising to that challenge, is when it makes us go, no, I can't, rather than what if. So if you are in that state, if you are seeing that in yourself, like scuba diving with the sharks, right? There is a moment where you go, am I going to let this stop me? Or am I going to take the chance that the experience on the other side will be worth it?
Yeah, I think it comes down to, similar to what we said about instinct, right? You quantify it. And the more you have a relationship with your impulses and your gut feelings and your instincts, right? You cultivate that relationship where you can decipher, is this an impulse right now? Is this an instinct? Or is this me wanting to do something because I don't want to do the opposite, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that same fear requires and deserves that same attention, if that makes sense. That same attention to cultivate that relationship, to understand where is the fear coming from.
Absolutely. And I think that what you just said is exactly right. When you, I call it, let's invite the fear in for coffee, let's have a cup of tea with it. And I will ask my life coaching clients to sit down and ask their fear some questions. What are you trying to tell me? Because something is here, and it's possible that I'll go, oh, actually, I've just, when I was a kid, I got mustard in my eye, and that's why I've hated mustard this whole time. Not that that's necessarily an example, but you see what I mean. So at some point, we look at all of this, and we have to decide how much of it is going to sort of keep us on the underside versus on the top side of being in control of our own destiny. And when you chose to go scuba diving with the sharks, that was you taking a stand. As far as what I can see, you were like, no, this is something I've decided to do. And even though I'm afraid, I'm still going to do it. So there's something that that urged you forward, and you did that, and you owned it, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
it's interesting. And I'd love to talk to you about this. I'm going to give you an example from my own life, and I'd love to get your thoughts on it, because there's something here that is so fascinating. I want to switch, if you don't mind, to talking about your Gold Coast, your Gold Coast, your Gold Coast talk. I can't even say that out loud right now. So let me lay this out for you, because it's about the soul. Okay. And I want to ask you about what you think it is and how it helps us live. Because I think there's something that is so powerful in something that they say, weighs 21 grams. But what is it, as far as who you are and what you believe? What is the soul?
I am so confused by this question. I have been confused by this my whole life, and so intrigued by it simultaneously that I actually spent 4 years studying what theology considered the soul to be, what philosophy considered the soul to be, what quantum physics considered the soul to be, because I was just really curious about this thing, the soul, which for me was the representation of the human spirit, right? The part of us that cannot be grabbed with our hand and has so much influence over our experience, how we experience things. And also, I think it's so genius. I think, like, I have no idea what it is. And to be honest with you, I used to read about it a lot. I used to study it a lot to try to come to some understanding. And I let that go, because I almost relish now in the fact that I don't even want to know, because if I find out something, I just don't ruin it for me, because I just love the experience of it so much, right? Whether it's the spirit, whether it's the subconscious, whether it's the daemon, as James Hillman talks about, whether it's our instincts or gut intuitions, maybe it's all of it, maybe it's part of it, maybe it's none of it. And I don't think we have a specific answer to it, because I don't really believe that we are supposed to know what it is. Otherwise, would we honor it so much? Or would I honor it so much? I honor it tremendously. And I think that's the magic within the human that allows to color my human experience, or the human experience from my perspective, with such shimmer and unpredictability and excitement and value and weight.
Yeah. Yeah. And I appreciate that you said that, because here's my experience from when I was younger that I wanted to mention to you in light of what your answer was. So a number of years ago, many years ago, 30 years ago or something like that, my father was building a house right near the Palace at Auburn Hills, or where it used to be. So to give you geographic context,
Yes.
because you'll know exactly where that is.
I know exactly where that is.
So he was building this house, and it had this huge staircase, very tall, from between the first and second level. And I had gone to see it, and the staircase was just 2x4s nailed and completely hollow, and no railing, no nothing. And so I walked up to see the second floor, which was all, planks at that point. But then when it came time to walk down, I got terrified. It looked so rickety and so unstable that I actually turned and sort of crawled my way back down. And the whole rest of the time I was at the house, as it was being constructed, it just sat in the back of my head and just made me go, I can't believe I let fear win. I can't believe that I didn't strike out for this and really live and really try to do this thing that I had wanted to do, which is simple. Looking back, it's walking down the stairs. So right before we left, I said, no, I have to do one more thing. And I ran into the house. I ran up those stairs, and then I walked down the stairs and I made myself decided that I was going to be able to do it, and that I needed to be able to do it, and that I would achieve this. And as I walked down that last step, a very, very specific little whisper inside me just went, see, I knew you could do it. And ever since then, I've been thinking that it was my soul, for lack of a better word, that went, good on you. I'm glad you did that. That moment was a very pure moment of my soul kind of going, you had it in you. I never had a doubt. And I wanted to get your take on that. Do you think that the soul speaks to us that directly, or is it more ephemeral than that?
My first impulse was to say, absolutely. And then I thought, well, does it? I don't know. I know that for me it does. And maybe for me it does because of the first answer I gave you at the beginning of the podcast, was because I'm stubborn. Maybe, my soul, my impulses need to speak to me more direct and ferocious so I can listen, right? Like the difference when I was saying to you between speaking to you and then when your soul's screaming at you. And maybe for other people, it's different. Maybe for other people, it's not in words and it's in images, right? You have people that have an ability to see images or see auras or see colors, or I'm sure there's so many other different ways to receive information that I'm not even aware of, that perhaps other people experience. And I know that for me, it's in words. It's an actual word communication, and the voice has a particular tone to it that works for me. And that when I hear it, I'm like, okay, I hear you. For other people, it may be something completely different. So do I think it speaks to us? Yes. Do I think it speaks to us in the same language? I don't know. I can only speak about the way it communicates with me. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, of course. And I think it is individual. I think that's the whole point. And I think everybody's soul expresses itself in one way or another. And, for me, if I were going to say what I think a soul is, it's funny because I have an answer, and it's creative essence. That's what I think a soul is. But I think that creativity, again, host of the Creative Mindset podcast, for those of you listening, it is that drive. It is that inspiration to make something that wasn't there before, whether it's a poem or a song or a painting, to express ourselves in a way that we can then share with others,
Yeah.
that is somewhat tangible. And I think of us primarily as creative beings. We are primarily at our base levels, we survive, but we also strive and create. And so with you writing Scar and with you being a poet, how does the soul express itself through creativity for you? Is it writing? Is it scuba diving? Is it a combination of everything you are? How does that happen for you?
I think for me, it's all of it. I think I definitely express myself through the written word. Um, I feel sometimes, because English is my second language, I have the ability to express myself more accurately by writing out what I want to say versus by speaking it.
Hmm.
And that comes with just learning multiple languages. When the dominant language that I currently use is English, but that's not the first language I learned, and that affects how I use the English language.
Sure.
But I think all the ways, I think scuba diving is an expression of my soul because I love it. I love it. I'm pretty blissed out when I have an opportunity to do it. And then there's moments where there's fear with it, right? Because I'm going to go scuba diving maybe somewhere dangerous or somewhere that's like super deep. But I have a relationship to that fear now that I can hear it, witness it, say, oh, hey, you're there. I acknowledge you. We're just going to go together. Come with me. Let me
Right.
show you.
Right.
But that took time, Izolda. That took a long time, a very long time. Remember that decade I was talking about? Again, that was a powerful decade for me because
Sure.
did I know that it was going to take a decade? No, but I was committed to feeling and becoming a particular woman and feeling a particular way. And however long it was going to take, I was okay with it, because I was okay with it taking the rest of my life to become it, even though there was a chance I may not get to a place where I was this comfortable with myself prior to my death. But maybe there was. And that was the path I was very comfortable and consciously taking. And I lost my train of thought while we were talking about scuba diving.
Well, we were
The idea of scuba diving totally took me somewhere else.
but that, because see, that's the thing. It was your soul expressing itself, and
Yeah.
what you were talking about was the idea of, essentially, like I say, take the fear out for a cup of coffee. You invited the fear with you so that you could show it that it
Yeah.
was going to be okay, and I think that when you make that sort of peace, that's one of the things that can make you feel really alive. That
Mm-hmm.
moment of going, I get that I'm afraid. I'm okay with that. And so the question then becomes, you took a decade, you took steps to start achieving that. And probably some you're still working through and will be for the rest of your life and the next life and the life after that, because this isn't a 3-week course we can take. But if you were going to define some of this, if you were going to define what it means to be really alive, how do you approach that? How do you approach that definition, and how do you approach living that way? Any ideas?
Peace. Are you peaceful inside? And no one can answer that for you except for yourself. And no one will know except for yourself. That's the beauty of it. You hold all the self-responsibility in your own hands, and it's your choice. You can listen to your inner rhythm, your inner self, thoughts, right? That can all be one thing or all three separate things. And you are the only one that can know how you feel. And that's what we can all wear masks and pretend we feel a particular way. But the reality is, you know. I really believe that human beings know. It's not about whether or not we know. It's about whether or not we will listen. And if you can't listen right now, that's okay too. Just have compassion and love for the part of yourself that you understand that you can't listen, and try to get to a place where you can listen, right? Like, just because you can't listen, or just because the inner rhythm is not peaceful, doesn't mean that you can't get there. It just means that this is also similar to fear. When there's fear, and not the fear of trying something new, the other fear, the fear that will derail us, it's because it's sitting on top of something that is so delicate, so vulnerable within ourselves, I think, that is just too much to take on right now. And those little moments need baby steps.
Baby steps
And
and tenderness. Yeah.
Yeah. And that, you know, that's how that's, you know, again, my thermometer is like, is Christina peaceful? You know, like I can be stressed out, like lots of things to do. My calendar's full, like at work, things to do, right? But that's very different than, am I peaceful inside?
It's such a powerful statement, just asking yourself that question. Am I peaceful inside? And maybe that's a place to start. You know, we've been talking about this for the last little while now, and for what seems like, you know, both 2 minutes and 14 years, this idea of, you know, no, doesn't it seem like we've been talking forever, and yet we've just begun? It's amazing. But this idea of just asking, start with that question. Do I feel peaceful inside? What a beautiful way to start. What a beautiful and poignant and delicate and tender way to start. So I want to thank you for that. I think that's a really just a lovely way of encapsulating this whole thing. Start with that question. And if you do, then there you go. But if you don't, then perhaps there are things that you can do about it as you learn about yourself. You know, there's something very, very simple, yet very powerful about that. I love it. Thank you so much. That's fabulous. So
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, amazing. So before we go for the next 4 hours, I know that you have a life to get back to. so I was wondering if you have, sorry, I have to take a drink of water.
No,
I feel like saying, talk amongst yourselves for a second. So, what resources could you recommend for someone who wants to embark on this sort of journey to themselves? Do you recommend people go study? Are there any books? What are your thoughts on that? Or is it more an internal process and we all come to it in our own way?
All of it. I mean, everything from, you know, again, I think I have come to realize that for me, that journey was so different than what I suspected it would be like. And that as I was on the journey, I discovered more ways to heal, whether it be meditation, whether it be, you know, I joke in my talk that I did everything, because at the time I was living in Los Angeles. I did crystal healings, I did chakra cleansings, I did meditation, I had a shaman. But then I did a lot of writing, I did a lot of reading. I went and, you know, did a master's course in consciousness studies, only because I thought everything I'm thinking about is just, I must be crazy. I need some reason for all these things, right? So I just kind of did it all. And I think what's important is to just be open. Just be open. I don't know. And for some people, it may just be time. For other people, it may be books. For other people, it may be healers or meditation or therapy. For other people, it may be ayahuasca. You know, there's so many things. For some people, it may be a particular person that comes into your life and just helps shift it and just affects you to your core in such a beautiful healing way that just helps shift it. I don't know that we know. And just being open to it and the possibilities, I think, is the best advice I can give anyone.
And I think it's brilliant advice. We have to be ready to open, I think, and that can be a challenge. And that's where we get back to this idea of getting comfortable with your fear and gently pushing those limits, being vulnerable but being tender with
Yeah.
yourself at the same time, which I think is so important. You seem like a woman who's always questioning and always seeking. So what are you curious about right now? What are you studying? What's got you going, "Ah, I want to know more about this"?
You're going to laugh at my answer.
Oh, I love it. Good.
Cooking. I have discovered also, recently that making a lot of great salads doesn't mean you're a great cook. And when you're missing so many organs, you by default have to eat healthy because
Mhm.
I have so many food restrictions, which limits me to, I tend to eat a lot of salads. And when you're an artist and a multidisciplinary creator, we're busy, and I've gotten so used to like a few meals that are predominantly raw. And I thought, oh yeah, I make a killer kale feta cheese salad. Like, I'm a great cook. And then all of a sudden you have to like actually start making meals. And I realized, oh, I'm not. Not that I'm bad. I'm just don't have vast creativity in cooking. So I really have been focusing on studying cooking, like how to cook a steak, not just like trial and error, like reading blogs or books about cooking and recipes. And I find it also refreshing to be learning about cooking right now, because I so often I'm like reading and studying about all the heavy stuff, psychology and philosophy, which I love, but it can be intense. The thoughts and ideas can be intense. And cooking is light, and I rarely study light things. And I'm fascinated by it right now. I'm excited by it, and I am getting better, I have to say.
Good for you. Yeah, I've always been fascinated by cook. No, seriously, it's wonderful because it's an alchemy of sorts. You put all these ingredients together and you do the hokey pokey several different times in several different ways, and out comes this lovely meal. And it's the
Yeah.
same with baking. Baking is a mystery to me, frankly. I loved chemistry when I was in high school and college, but it's a mystery because if you miss one little ingredient, everything gets all kerfuffled. So
Yeah.
I cook because things are much more uh, malleable. You can play with the ingredients in cooking. You can't so much with baking. So I appreciate what you said, and I can't follow recipes, and that I think that is partially the whole English isn't my first language thing. I'm rubbish at following recipes, so I just make my own stuff up. Even though I have all these, I'm vegan, so I have like the Mediterranean vegan kitchen and vegan with a vengeance and the veganomicon. And I have all of these vegan cookbooks that I never use because I can't follow recipes. And that's okay because it means that I get to explore, and exploring is very creative. It feeds that other part of my soul. So I'm really excited that you said that. So speaking of books, and they can be cookbooks, what 3 books have you recently read that affected you on that deeper level that made you go, yeah, this book is amazing?
I don't know if it's specific books. I mean, it's writers. Joseph
Hmm.
Campbell for
Oh,
me
love him.
is yeah, I love him. I really resonate with what he says and how he says things. And Krishnamurti for me is, I'm always pretty much my mind is like being blown every sentence with that
Right.
man. And I think it's just those two that are coming to mind for me right now.
Both great. Both great.
Yeah.
Campbell, the first time I saw The Power of Myth, I saw it before I read it. I was glued. I'm a ginormous mythology fan, for lack of a better word, especially Greek mythology. And so I just The Power of Myth changed meant much of how I think, and much of how I approach problem solving and ideas and relationships and all of that. So I
Mm.
I love I love that you said his work is just amazing. I know, as I said, I know you have things to do and places to go. So I would love to find out from you, if you wouldn't mind, and I want to put this in the show notes, how I'm sure you're going to have tons of new fans, tons of people who want to come see your show and read more about you and get in on your blog. How do people find you on social media? I've already said your website, but again, it's www.christinahelena.com. But what about social media? You have a presence on social? How do people find you?
I do. I'm mostly on Instagram. I love Instagram because I love the photos and captions. It's like writing little poems under photos. I'm on Instagram at I am Christina Helena, and also on Facebook, which I believe is facebook.com/Christina Helena, but they're all linked up. You can link up to all of them from my website. That's the
Perfect.
easiest place to go.
Perfect. And I have just two more little things. First, do you have any last words of wisdom or guidance that you want to share?
The first word that came to mind was listen. Just listen. I think human beings have it all in them. I think the work is moving all the stuff out of the way to be able to hear clearly. And that feeling I hope people see that as empowering, because the tools are within you. You don't have to go searching for them. You just have to, shake the dust off of them.
Blow the dust off so you can see them clearly. So, right? I mean, that's how it is sometimes in my house. I'm not the tidiest person, and I am very okay with that. So and you may have already answered the question with your last answer, but here's the question that I ask of everybody who comes on the show. And it's a silly question, but it's one I really like to ask. And the question is, if you had an airplane that could skywrite something across the sky that everybody in the world would see, what would you say?
Love is the answer. I know we all know this. We all know this. I don't know a single person that doesn't know this. But it's so vulnerable to come from a place of love sometimes. And that vulnerability can bring up things. But like Brene Brown says, if we can be in our vulnerability, then the love is just autonomous, I think.
Mm. Yeah, and it is crucial to and part of everything, I think. And you know what's really funny? Here's what's really funny about what you just said. So as I said, I asked this of every guest who comes on the show, every single one. And I did an interview earlier with one of my dear friends. He's a Grammy Award-winning musician, Al Petaway. And would you like to know what his answer was?
What did he say?
Love is the answer. Literally the exact
today's
same.
The day.
Today is the day. When you said that, I was like,
Today's
that's
the day.
exactly what Al said. And it's just, I was like, well, obviously there's something in the air. I love it. I love it. Yeah, that's the exact same thing. And then he went to the Beatles were right. So, that's where he took it. But yeah, it's so, like you said, it's basic, it's simple, it's real, and it's just the truth. That's it. It's just the truth.
Yeah.
So, Christina, I'm so grateful that you joined me for this incredible conversation. I'm so, so grateful to you for being here and for sharing your wisdom. I'm super excited to have your episode out there and to have people find more about you and more about your work, your creative life, your life striving to achieve that quiet inner voice and that sense of peace, and in a way that is so incredibly creative and giving. So I really appreciate you being here, and I cannot thank you enough.
Oh, Izolda, that's beautiful. Thank you. It was really my pleasure to be here, and I relished in this conversation with you. It was just so juicy. Thank you for having me.
So much fun. My pleasure. My pleasure. And you're going to get to know more about Christina Helena through this and follow her work, get on her blog. It's brilliant. She's got so much incredible stuff to say consistently, which I just adore. As it is right now, you have been listening to the Creative Mindset Podcast. My name is Izolda Trachtenberg. If you liked what you heard, let me know. Leave a review. Get in touch, find out what makes you feel fulfilled and happy and creative, and just go on and do it. Until next time, again, this is Izolda Trachtenberg, and I send you all of my love. Thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you being here. Today's episode was produced by Izolda Trachtenberg and is copyright 2020. As always, please remember this is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Past performance does not guarantee future results, although we can always hope. Until next time, this is Izolda Trachtenberg, and I send you all of my love.